In March 1994, a couple disappeared in the Mexican desert during a private trip. The woman was pregnant and the man was 54 years old. They vanished without leaving a trace. The police searched for months but found nothing, and the case was forgotten. 13 years later, some tourists made a horrifying discovery in the middle of nowhere, a human skeleton tied with wires to a giant cactus full of thorns. Nearby, there was a pink shirt stained with blood lying on the hot sand. What happened to that couple back in 1994? Why did they disappear? Who would do this to innocent people? And why did it take so long to uncover the truth? The desert kept that terrible secret for years. But when the truth finally came out, it was harsher and more shocking than anyone could have imagined. This is the real story of a crime that no one could solve, one that changed a family's life forever. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more cases like this, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. In March 1994, the Chihuahua Desert was hiding its secrets under a blazing sun that turned the sand into an oven. Ethan Morrison, 54, was tightly holding the hand of Alice Patterson, 46, as they walked down the dusty road toward their car. The couple had decided to take a trip, especially to celebrate Alice's pregnancy, who was 46 years old, fulfilling her long-awaited dream of becoming a mom. The trip started as a small, intimate occasion. Ethan, a retired engineer from Phoenix, had carefully planned their route through the Mexican desert. Alice, an art teacher, was beaming with joy over the pregnancy news. It was the result of years of trying and treatments. They left Tucson on the morning of March 15th, heading to a small village where they planned to spend 3 days in a rustic hotel. Their last contact with civilization was at 2:30 p.m. when Ethan called his brother in Phoenix to let him know they were doing fine. They were enjoying the stunning view when the connection suddenly cut off. When the brother tried to call back, there was no signal, and no one knew that would be the last time they heard their voices. After 3 days, when they still hadn't returned as planned, the family started a desperate search. The Mexican authorities were contacted, but the vastness of the Chihuahua Desert made any investigation extremely difficult. Helicopters flew over thousands of square kilometers. Volunteers combed familiar trails, and trained dogs were used, all to no avail. A week later, the couple's car was found abandoned on a side road about 200 kilometers from the last place they were seen. The car was intact, the keys were in place, and personal belongings were inside. There were no signs of violence or a struggle, but there was no trace of Ethan and Alice walking on foot in that barren desert. The investigation went on for months, but gradually died down, and the case was filed away as an unsolved disappearance. 2 families were left shattered, and the whole community was in shock. The desert had swallowed the couple without a trace. Over time, the tragedy became a painful memory, buried deep in the hearts of those who loved them. Time in the Chihuahuan Desert moves differently than anywhere else, even as cities grow around it. The dunes stay solid, hiding layers of sand moved by the wind. For 13 years, the story of Ethan and Alice Morrison turned into a local legend. The couple suddenly disappeared without a trace in Phoenix. Marcus Morrison, Ethan's brother, never lost hope. At 58, he kept a makeshift office at home full of maps, photos, and police reports. He had retired early from his job as an accountant to focus entirely on searching for his brother and sister-in-law. His wife, Sarah, watched with growing worry as what started as a hobby turned into an obsession that consumed her husband. Over those years, Marcus hired 3 private investigators. They all made promises that never came true, and every year there was a campaign organized in the desert around the same time as the anniversary of the disappearance. That anniversary revealed a hidden secret. The groups of volunteers who accompanied him grew smaller each year. Those campaigns were like a pilgrimage for a desperate man. The Mexican authorities, who had been cooperative at first, started dealing with Marcos with polite but cold patience. The case was officially closed in 1997, 3 years after the disappearance. No new evidence, witnesses, or leads showed up. The desert kept its absolute silence, and the police were busy with newer, easier crimes. Life went on for everyone except Marcos, who became just a face. He was a regular at police stations on both sides of the border, always carrying the same worn-out leather folder filled with faded photos of Ethan and Alyssa. His determination was impressive, but it started to worry those around him. Yet the desert was patient, keeping its secrets forever, the scorching sun and cold nights. Something was waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Nature has its own way of uncovering the truth, and sometimes it does so when no one expects it, through people no one expects. On the morning of October 3rd, 2007, the sun rose clear and dry over the Chihuahua Desert. A group of German tourists, led by the experienced guide Carlos Mendoza, decided to explore a remote area far away from. The traditional guides were looking for unique photos of desert plants, especially the stunning cactus trees that the region is famous for. Among the tourists was Klaus Weber, a 35-year-old professional photographer who specializes in dry landscapes. He broke away from the group by about 500 meters, following Doza's advice to reach a hidden valley where giant cacti grow in dramatic formations. The sun was in the perfect spot to shoot for his upcoming exhibition. As he rounded a rocky outcrop, Klaus stumbled upon a scene that would change his life forever. In the middle of the valley stood a 4-meter-tall saguaro cactus shaped like a twisted, grotesque human figure, tangled in its own spines and tied up. Barbed wire, but it had withstood time and weather. I found human remains. The skeleton was tied to a cactus in a way that suggested a slow, painful death. Even though the wires were rusty, they were still clear, showing the victim had been deliberately bound to the spiky plant. The position of the bones pointed to a desperate attempt to break free, but the thorns and restraints turned every move into more agony. About 2 meters from the cactus, partially buried in the sand, Klaus noticed a piece of pink cloth. He approached carefully and found a tight, sleeveless pink blouse with a neck opening, filthy and stained with what was clearly blood. The piece was surprisingly well preserved despite the years that had passed. In the desert, Klaus screamed in shock, calling out to the guide, Mendoza, who rushed over with the rest of the group. The scene was so horrifying that 2 of the tourists immediately felt faint. Despite his experience, Mendoza had never seen anything so brutal before. He quickly contacted the Mexican authorities by radio, realizing they were facing a gruesome crime. That discovery marked the start of an investigation that would finally bring answers to 2 families who had suffered for over a decade. News of the shocking find in the Chihuahua Desert spread fast across the media on both sides of the border. Investigator Eduardo Ruiz from the Chihuahua Judicial Police was appointed to lead the case. The investigator was 42 years old, known for his precision and expertise in complex cases, but the scene affected him deeply. The first task was to set up a secure perimeter around the site and document every detail with extreme accuracy. Crime scene photographer Miguel Santos took hundreds of photos, each revealing terrifying new details about what happened in that isolated place. The wires used to tie the victim were a specific type, plastic-coated steel wire, commonly used in agricultural settings. Forensic doctor Dr. Flores arrived at the site late in the afternoon with his specialized team. The process of removing the human remains was delicate and extremely unsettling, as they had penetrated. The cactus spines had pierced the bones in several places, and some bone fragments remained stuck in the spines even after all the soft tissue had decomposed. The pink blouse was carefully collected and sent for forensic analysis. Despite the passage of time, the bloodstains were still able to provide valuable information, and the fabric was torn in a way that clearly indicated sexual assault, confirming the investigators' worst fears about what the victim had endured before being tied to the cactus. During the first days of the investigation, the victim's identity remained a mystery since there were no documents or personal belongings at the scene, and the body's complete decomposition made visual identification impossible. That's when Inspector Ruiz decided to check the archives. The missing persons case over the last 15 years first showed a lead with the case of Ethan and Alice Morrison, who disappeared in 1994. It immediately caught Ruiz's attention. The timing of their disappearance, the approximate location, and most importantly, the description of the pink blouse Alice was said to be wearing that day, as the whole family reported. It created a troubling connection. Mexican authorities contacted Marcus Morrison, who traveled straight to Chihuahua. When he saw the pink blouse, he broke down in tears. It was definitely the piece Alice had specially bought for that trip, a blouse she considered special for celebrating the pregnancy. With the preliminary identification confirmed, Lawless Morrison, as a victim, took the investigation in a completely new direction. Inspector Ruiz requested all the original case files from 1994, including interviews with family, friends, and acquaintances. During this thorough review, one name stood out worryingly: Raymond Torres. Raymond Torres, who was 52 years old in 1994, had been Alice's boyfriend for almost 2 years, from 1991 to 1993. The relationship ended painfully when Alice left him to marry Ethan Morrison. During the original investigation, Torres was quickly questioned, but his story seemed solid, and he had an alibi for the time she disappeared. However, rereading the interviews, careful attention revealed details that went unnoticed at the time. Several of Alice's friends mentioned that Torres became obsessed with her after their breakup. He kept stalking her, showing up at her workplace uninvited, and calling her persistently in the middle of the night. Sarah Martinez, Alice's close friend, said in 1994 that Torres repeatedly threatened Alice, saying she wouldn't be happy with another man. He even had detailed knowledge of her plans with Ethan, including a trip to the Chihuahua Desert. Back then, these stories were seen as just normal jealousy from an ex, but now they take on a more sinister meaning. Investigations into Raymond Torres revealed a troubling history of violence. He was convicted twice on domestic violence charges. He was against former girlfriends since 1982 and worked as a mechanic in a shop specializing in off-road vehicles. He had extensive knowledge of desert navigation, and most importantly, he owned a four-wheel drive vehicle perfectly modified for rough terrain. Inspector Ruiz ordered a full investigation into Torres's whereabouts, and to the team's surprise, they found out he moved to Mexico just 2 months after Alice and Ethan disappeared. He bought a remote property in Sonora, about 300 miles from where the body was found. He sold the property in 2003 and then vanished without leaving a trace, though some neighbors remembered him from that time. He was a reclusive and hostile man who kept the property fenced off and rarely interacted with the neighbors. Some of them said they occasionally heard screams coming from the property but were too scared to check it out. The manhunt for Raymond Torres intensified when the investigation revealed that he hadn't just disappeared, he had assumed a new identity. Through connections in the Mexican criminal world, he got fake ID papers and started going by Ricardo Vega, a cattle rancher in the Sinaloa area. Inspector Ruiz, working with U.S. authorities, successfully tracked Torres down using bank records and real estate transactions. The operation was planned very carefully due to a history of violence and the possibility that he was armed. A special team from the Mexican Federal Police was deployed to carry out the mission on December 15, 2007. Authorities surrounded the isolated farm where Torres was living under the identity of Ricardo Vega. The farm was located in a mountainous area, accessible only by a narrow dirt road. Torres had deliberately chosen the spot for its defensive advantages and escape routes. During the operation, Torres tried to flee on foot through the mountains, but was caught after a chase that lasted several hours. Even though he was 65 years old, he was still strong, but years of addiction and isolation had taken their toll. When they finally put the handcuffs on him, he went completely silent, refusing to answer any questions. During the search of the property, horrifying evidence was found in a backyard shed. Investigators discovered a terrifying collection of photos of Alice, secretly taken in the months leading up to her disappearance. The pictures showed Alice in everyday situations, leaving her house, at work, shopping, all without her knowing. The most shocking discovery was a detailed notebook Torres kept, obsessively tracking Alice's movements. Ethan had even drawn maps. From their habits and phone call records, it seems he intercepted them and carefully planned the kidnapping. That notebook revealed a sick mind consumed by jealousy and a desire for revenge. Among his belongings, investigators found the same type of steel wire used to tie Yasin to the cactus, as well as tools that could be used for digging a grave, suggesting that Ethan was killed and buried somewhere still unknown. After 3 days of intense investigation, Raymond Torres finally broke his silence, maybe due to psychological pressure or the inevitability of the situation. He started speaking wildly, unloading decades of secrets all at once. He confessed terrifying details about the last days of his life. Ethan Morrison followed the couple from Phoenix, keeping a safe distance. He knew their route because he had accessed Alice's work computer weeks before the trip. Using his knowledge of cars and desert navigation, he set up an ambush on a side road where the car was later found. He executed the ambush with military precision, pretending his car broke down, which forced Ethan to stop and help him. When Ethan got out, Torres attacked him with a baseball bat, knocking him to the ground immediately. Since Alice was pregnant and weak, she was easy to control. They tied her up and gagged her, then moved their 2 victims to a spot about 50 meters off the road where Torres had set up a temporary camp. On the first day, Ethan was executed with a gunshot to the head, but he kept Al S. alive for almost a week. He had planned a terrifying and sadistic revenge against the woman he believed had betrayed his love. During those 7 days, Al S. was subjected to unspeakable physical and psychological torture. He forced her to write an apology letter for leaving him and kept it as a keepsake. The attacks got worse every day, feeding his sick desire for control and revenge. Fatima's confession revealed that Alice tried to escape on the 5th night and partly managed to free herself. She ran desperately across the desert, but he caught up with her and brought her back after a few hours. That's when he decided to carry out the final stage of his revenge, tying her up. Torres painfully detailed how he deliberately chose that cactus in a remote valley where no one could hear Alice's screams. He tied her up in a way that any movement would cause her more wounds, making sure her death was as painful as possible. Before leaving her, he tore her blouse as a final act of humiliation. Raymond Torres's trial began in March 2008, 9 months after his arrest. The case got heavy media coverage on the border, and public opinion was clearly against him. The prosecution, led by federal attorney Miguel Sandoval, built a strong case based on Torres's own confessions. The physical evidence and testimonies, defense for Torres, led by prosecutor Carlos Herrera, tried to claim temporary insanity. Herrera argued that Torres's history of alcoholism and isolation weakened his mental capacity, making him unable to understand his actions. Psychological experts were called to assess his mental state. Forensic psychologist Patricia Morales testified that Torres suffers from antisocial personality disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder, but he was fully capable of distinguishing right from wrong. His detailed confession and careful planning of the crime showed premeditation and full awareness of his actions. Marcus Morrison appeared at every session. From the courtroom sessions, sitting in the front row next to the prosecution, his quiet and steady presence showed his pursuit of justice, as well as the pain of a family that had waited 14 years for answers. His wife, Sarah, was by his side to support him through the toughest moments. The most intense part of the trial was when Torres was questioned about Ethan Morrison's fate. At first, he refused to reveal the location of the body, but under pressure from the prosecution, he admitted that he had buried Ethan in a valley about 10 kilometers from where Alice was found. A search team was immediately sent based on that info, and after 2 days of digging, Ethan's remains were found in a shallow grave, confirming the story. Torres had a cracked skull that matched the blow from the stick, just like he described in his confession on July 5, 2008. After only 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Raymond Torres guilty of 2 counts of murder, aggravated kidnapping, torture, and rape. The court, led by Judge Roberto Fuentes, sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, which is the maximum penalty under Mexican law. Torres's conviction brought a sense of justice, but it didn't bring healing to those affected by this tragedy. Marcus Morrison, who spent 14 years of his life searching for the truth, found himself in a confusing situation. He got what he always wanted, but soon realized the truth was scarier than any doubt. In the months after the trial, Marcus went through severe depression. He learned the details of Alice and Ethan's suffering, which shattered him. He started having constant nightmares, reliving the final moments of his brother and wife's lives. Sarah, his wife, had to ask him to get professional psychological help. The therapy with Dr. Linda Chen, a specialist in trauma and loss, helped him not only overcome his grief, but also the guilt he felt for not being able to save them. During the sessions, he admitted he felt responsible because he didn't insist on the original investigation and ignored those warning signs that Ryan Torres represented. The healing journey was long and tough. Marcus had to learn how to deal with the intense anger he felt toward Torres, as well as the guilt and helplessness eating away at his heart. Dr. Chen helped him understand that his relentless dedication to finding the truth was an act of love, not failure. Gradually, he started channeling his experience in a positive way, becoming an advocate for the families of the missing and working with NGOs to improve investigation protocols for disappearance cases. His personal experience gave him a unique insight into the shortcomings. Sarah needed psychological support to deal with years of anxiety and the impact her husband's obsession had on her mental health. In couples therapy sessions, they worked on rebuilding their relationship and finding a new balance in their lives. In 2010, after 2 years of the trial, Marcus and Sarah founded the Morrison Family Support Foundation to help families dealing with missing loved ones and to fund advanced search and identification technologies. The foundation became one of the leading organizations of its kind in the United States and helped hundreds of families find answers. It's been 15 years since that horrifying crime was discovered. In the Chihuahua Desert, the Morrison case became a landmark in cross-border crime investigations. Inspector Eduardo Ruiz gained international recognition for his meticulous work and became a trusted advisor on similar cases worldwide. The story of Alice and Ethan Morrison serves as a grim reminder of the dangers of stalking and domestic violence. Raymond Torres showed clear signs of being controlling and violent, but the justice system at that time didn't take his threats seriously. As a direct result of this case, changes were made to laws and victim protection protocols in several U.S. states. Meanwhile, the Chihuahua Desert, which had hidden terrible secrets, came to hold even more. There's now a small memorial at the spot where Alice was found. Thanks to a joint effort between Marcus Morrison and the Mexican authorities, permission was granted to put up a plaque that honors not just Alice and Ethan, but all the victims of violence who were never found or whose cases remain unsolved. Raymond Torres is still locked up in the federal prison in Maloya, expected to spend the rest of his life there. At 80 years old, he rarely gets visitors and has little contact with the outside world. Reports say his mental health is declining. He's suffering from early dementia, often talks to himself, and sometimes mentions Alice's name like she's still alive. The Morrison Institute kept growing its work, and by 2020, it had helped solve over 200 missing person cases using advanced DNA analysis, forensic investigations, and search techniques. Now 75 years old, Marcus still serves as the regular head of the institute, turning his personal tragedy into a force for good. The case also highlighted how important international cooperation is in crime investigations. The partnership between U.S. and Mexican authorities was key to cracking the case and bringing Torres to justice. This track record had a direct impact on future agreements. Regarding police cooperation between the two countries, perhaps the most notable legacy left by the Morrison case is the awareness it raised about warning signs found in obsessive and violent behavior. Nowadays, educational programs in schools and universities include information about threats, harassment, and domestic violence to teach people how to recognize dangerous behavior and report it. The Chihuahua Desert couldn't keep its secrets hidden for more than 13 years, but once the truth finally came out, it turned into a force for justice and protecting the innocent.